Hey class, today we're going to finish up the nervous system. We talked about the microscopic anatomy of nervous tissue. We've talked about how nerve impulses are sent from one neuron to another and then down a neuron. We talked about the two major divisions of the nervous system, and then today we're going to finish out by talking about how the nervous system is protected. There are several different ways that the nervous system is protected. The first one is your scalp and your skin protects. It is the first layer of defense against bacteria from entering inside your body and eventually making its way to the nervous system. The next major ones that we talked about in the skeletal system was the skull is going to protect the brain, and then the vertebral column is going to protect your spinal cord. These are going to protect them in terms of jolting, bumping, or falling. Then we have nerve support cells. We talked about nerve support cells kind of at the very beginning when we talked about nervous tissue or neurons. In our CNS, we said that these were sometimes called neuroglia cells, and we'll talk about a few specific ones in this lesson. And then the other three are new ones that we have not talked about. So we're going to talk about meninges, cerebrospinal fluid, also abbreviated CSF, and then the blood-brain barrier. So like I said, we're going to talk about a few more support cells and specific ones. There are a lot of different support cells that actually help protect and support neurons within our nervous system, but we're only going to talk about two today. The first one is called astrocytes. Astrocytes is illustrated by this picture down here on the left, picture A, and their major function is to provide a barrier between blood capillaries that are going to the brain and then neurons that those blood capillaries are tied close in proximity with. They help protect them from any kind of harmful substances that could potentially be in the blood. So here we see an astrocyte, which is a support cell. It has extensions that grab onto neurons and then onto our blood vessel or blood capillary, which is in red, to kind of add another layer of protection. The second type of support cell are called microglia. These are phagocytes. And I don't know if you guys learned this in biology, but phagocytes are basically cells that eat other things / cells. So basically these are cells that kind of hang out that dispose of any debris that are around neurons, such as like dead brain cells and bacteria, by basically eating them and digesting them. So picture B shows microglial cells within our CNS, or our central nervous system. The next thing we'll talk about is meninges. Meninges is basically a protective membrane. It's connective tissue that helps cover and protect structures within our central nervous system, such as our brain and spinal cord. There are three different membranes that make up meninges. There's the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Their function is to help protect and anchor your brain, but the biggest point of the meninges is to provide support for any blood vessels, nerves, or lymphatic tissue that would surround your central nervous system. Here is an image of your skull / brain, and it kind of shows you these different layers that we have to protect our brain. So again, we talked about in the very first slide that our bones of our cranium or skull is going to be our one of our layers of defense. We also have skin on the outside. So skin is our first layer, followed by bone. And then we have our three meninge layers. Our dura mater, and then we have our arachnoid mater, which kind of looks like spider web-like. Think of like arachnoid as a spider, so this is spider-like webs. And then our pia mater, and then eventually we reach our brain. Here, if you were looking at an actual image of our brain, typically if you were to cut the skull open, you would have to go through these connective tissue layers in order to see what a brain looks like underneath it. So here the picture on the right shows the layer, the picture on the left shows if we were to remove the meninges what the brain would look like. The next one is called cerebral spinal fluid. This is abbreviated CSF, shortened. This is a fluid that forms a watery cushion to protect the brain and spinal cord. So it's located all throughout our central nervous system, and essentially it helps the brain float so it's not damaged by the pressure of its own weight. So it is suspended. However, we still have to make sure that we do not take any major blows to the head, because while this does help provide some type of cushion, you can still damage your brain if you get hit hard enough. Couple other things about CSF. It is continuously formed by a network of cells called the choroid plexus, and this plexus is actually located in your epithalamus region, if you remember that term when we talked about the diencephalon of the brain. And one thing to note about the formation of CSF is that it's going to form and then drain out of the skull at a constant rate, because we want to make sure that this fluid within our brain maintains normal pressure and volume. If this pressure gets too high, it can push on brain cells and actually cause damage to your brain. So for example, you've maybe heard of people hitting their head very hard or having some kind of brain swelling. Typically, this is because the swelling, we have too much CSF fluid that is collecting and other fluids that are collecting. So typically, they have to drill a hole in somebody's skull in order to relieve that pressure. And then the last thing is there are special types of cells located along your central nervous system structures called epidermal cells. These are going to contain cilia to help circulate our CSF all around the brain and spinal cord. Here is an image that I took from your guys' textbook to kind of show how the CSF flows throughout the brain. Here we have the choroid plexus of our fourth ventricle is a structure of cells down here. The big major one, though, is your choroid plexus in your lateral and third ventricle. This is up in your thalamus region, your epithalamus, thalamus region. It is going to be made and it's going to circulate around the brain. No, I am not going to make you know the stages of the circulation for your guys' test. You just need to know that it is made by your choroid plexus and then it does protect your brain and spinal cord. And the last one we're going to talk about is your blood-brain barrier. Your blood-brain barrier is a protective layer. It lines the inner surfaces of your blood vessels inside your brain. Essentially, your brain is super important to your body, so we need to regulate what substances can enter and exit your brain through these blood vessels. Your blood-brain barrier does protect against anything that's harmful substances like toxin and most drugs. Now, it's not going to be 100% foolproof. It does protect against wastes, large proteins, and any non-essential amino acids from entering. However, some things still need to be able to get in. For example, our brain still needs to have water. It still needs to get respiratory gases. And what I mean respiratory gases, I'm talking about O2 needs to be able to enter and CO2 needs to be able to leave. We also allow glucose in because glucose is one of our major molecules that we use to break down in order to get ATP or energy. And any essential amino acids are allowed to pass through. Now, like I said, the blood-brain barrier does offer a form of protection, but it is not 100% foolproof. That's the reason I said most drugs. Some harmful substances can make its way through. Those are going to be things like alcohol, and we see ourselves being affected when we drink alcohol. We lose our sense of balance. Anesthetics also are going to affect us. This is what we use to put ourselves to sleep. Caffeine, sedatives, other things like that. Nicotine can also be added to this list as well. And that's the end of today's lesson. If you guys have any questions, please make sure you ask. And otherwise I hope you guys have a great day.